Rex Brown was the groove machine behind Pantera, Down and Kill Devil Hill. By his own admission, he was never one to talk to the press and was relegated as the quiet one in the band. In this two-part series, we're going to be taking a look at all of his basses, some of his guitars, all of his amplifiers and his warehouse of effects. In this video, part 1, we're talking all things Pantera. So if you're waiting to see his bass rigging Down and Kill Devil Hill and the solo stuff, you're going to need to subscribe and click the bell icon down below so you won't miss it when it's released. Speaking of subscribing, I need to show you guys at home something. This is a graph showing how many people watch my videos but haven't subscribed. Currently, 87% of you guys watching won't be notified when part 2 will be released. So if you like what I'm doing here and you're looking forward to part 2, please subscribe, show some love, and you could be one of the first people to see the rig release. It costs you absolutely nothing, but it means a hell of a lot to me. Thank you very much. PSA over. On with the show. Born in 1964 in Graham, Texas, Rex Brown would live his childhood to the soundtrack of his mother and sister's vinyl collection. Another influence of Rex's was his grandmother, who composed music for the silent films. He would sit on her knee and take in every sight and sound in musical fascination. Rex admits on reflection, "It was almost as if I was being force-fed music. Music was always being played by someone in the house." Around the time Rex was age 9, his musical mind had reached new levels of confidence and power, stumbling upon ZZ Top's Tush on the AM radio. ZZ Top was a new type of boogie and stomp, and I really dug it. My first thought was, screw this, I want an electric guitar now. This is what I've got to do now. From this point on, music was Rex's primary focus, getting himself an acoustic guitar and joining the church choir. Eventually joining his school's junior hype band, with his sights firmly set on the drumline. The teachers, on the other hand, decided Rex would be best suited to play the tuba. Whilst initially disgruntled, Rex soon acknowledged it turned out to be the right choice, because it was excellent musical training and he got good at it in a hurry. Rex's teenage years continued with more musical studies and lessons, with a focus on the acoustic guitar. At this point he was already experienced with the acoustic guitar, the tuba, drums and piano. It was only after studying a John Denver songbook he realised how bored he was playing the guitar, so he switched to the bass. That, and there are already too many guitarists. Rex mentions on a Facebook Q&A that his first basses were a Gibson Grabber and a Fender Precision. In his first real band, Neck and the Brewheads, he mostly played covers of Led Zeppelin, Rush and the Rolling Stones. The band lasted a couple of years until Rex was poached for a brand new band in 1982. While still in school, Rex would share an algebra class with Vinnie Paul Abbott. The two would talk all things musical related. Through their acquaintance, Rex would regularly borrow a PA system from Vinnie, as the singer in his own band would never turn up with his own. It was at this time where Vinnie and his younger brother Daryl were creating their own band, Pantera. One night, around 11:30 PM in June 1982, Rex returned home from a gig with Neck and the Brewheads. Daryl Abbott was on the phone and asked Rex if he could come by and lay some bass lines down for some tracks. Rex would confess, as good as Neck and the Brewheads were, they were a party band, with the members keeping an eye on college in the future. The Abbott brothers and Pantera, on the other hand, they were long term. They were serious. Jumping back in the car with his bass in the back seat, Rex left for the studio and laid down 3 tracks that the Abbotts were recording for their debut album, Metal Magic. It turns out the Abbotts were due to part ways with their current bass player Tommy Bradford, and it was clear to Rex from the first session he was the bassist for them. He was given a formal invitation to join Pantera on June 7th, 1982, aged just 17. Rex explained there were 2 conditions to joining Pantera. They felt they had to lay down some basic ground rules. Number 1, I had to quit smoking, and 2, I couldn't drink. So when I walked into my first rehearsal as a band member, I had a cigarette hanging out of my mouth and a 6-pack of Löwenbräu under my arm. That is the fucking truth, and that is how it all began. Rex's autobiography is a little light on details of the basses used at this time, but we do know an Ibanez Roadster was bought just before Rex joined Pantera and was used to record Metal Magic in 83, Projects in the Jungle in 84, and I Am the Night in 85. This bass was put on auction in 2015, with Rex giving a description of its history. It had the sound of an old P bass that I always liked. The drill bullet holes and blood splatter was done in Dime's garage on a very late and beer-swilled evening. This bass really is the building block bass for me in many ways. It was part of the learning experience we all went through, in laying the foundation of what that rhythm section was all about. That Texas boogie that eventually grew into power groove. I'm still at odds with getting rid of her, but I'd much rather someone else enjoy it than it just sitting in a case for another 30 years. The stories it could tell. Not long after this, the Roadster was relegated as a backup in favour of a brand new Red Hamer Explorer bass. Rex also comments that this bass ended up in pieces. By 1985, Rex Rocker would be rocking a white 1985 Jackson concert bass. And again, we find out some more information about this bass from the auction post in 2015. We'll go into more detail about the auction items in part 2, because there is a lot of them. The auction website description lists this as Rex's second bass, during Pantera, I would imagine. It became his main weapon of choice all the way up to the early 1990s. To quote Rex, "This bass was the very first Jackson I ever purchased at Valley View Mall in Dallas. I played this bass exclusively along with my black Jackson Charvel that came at a later time frame. Although this bass wasn't primarily used on Cowboys from Hell or Vulgar Display of Power, we did use it on those records by adding piccolo bass strings that are still on it to simulate an 8-string for those records. I used this bass from 1985 through 88, in the early days after Philip joined the band. This is also the bass that we recorded power metal with. This bass was fitted with a classic looking J40 humbucker in the bridge. Something not really spoken about is a BC Reach Warlock, which was spotted in this photograph in 1987. This is the only record of this bass." The band would head into the studio in February 1990 and spend 2 months recording Cowboys from Hell. A black 1987 Jackson Charvel bass appeared around this time. If Cowboys from Hell and Vulgar Display of Power are the defining sounds of Pantera, then this bass is its grooving heart. Made in 1987 and becoming Rex's third bass, the Jackson Charvel became his go-to in the years from late 88 to 92, and used to record Cowboys from Hell and Vulgar Display of Power, as well as used on the subsequent tours. Originally, this bass had a crackle blue finish, which was repainted in all black. Towards the end, the guitar was repainted a few more times, including a touch-up of the headstock, where the initial white-coloured logo was changed to purple. 1990 was also the first time we see Rex incorporate 5 strings into his rig. One of the first to arrive was a white Charvel Fusion, and used on Cemetery Gates. Speaking of Cemetery Gates, Rex mentions in his autobiography, the song was written by he and Dime playing on acoustic guitars. Rex was using a Kramer Farrington acoustic bass. The tour for Vulgar Display of Power now showed Rex using Musicman Stingrays in 4 and 5 string models. Rex describes the change in a passage from his autobiography. "I just got in a deal with Musicman and was using their Stingray bass because I was really looking for a change. I knew the bass sound I wanted, a tone that would really pop out in the mix, but I just hadn't found it yet." Rex would also clarify the usage of a 5-string. "I would sometimes go down to the low B instead of a higher one, but I used the B more for tonal character, not riffs." Also joining Rex on the tour were a couple of Fernandez basses of the TEB1 model, featuring a body shape in the style of a Telecaster guitar, something Rex was always very fond of, as he once declared, "I'm a telly freak." "Me too, I once played Mike TV in a school Willy Wonka play."
Can't you shut up? I'm busy. Boy, what a great show.
Anyway, 2 4-string models, all white and all black, as well as a 5-string with a reverse headstock and a cool cream colour with a tortoise pickguard. You could also get a glimpse of a Fernandez in the video for This I Love. Rex would divulge in an interview with GuitarWorld.com that we had been playing through the same gear for 500 days between 1989 and 1994, so we felt it was time for experimentation. During the recording of Far Beyond Driven in 1994, a Black Sabbath cover for Planet Caravan featured Rex playing a fretless Stingray and keyboards on the track. He was also on the hunt for a new sound, as recorded in his autobiography. "I had all these guitar companies sending me coffee table looking guitars. Basses like Warwick would come in and I plugged them in and they sounded like crap. We'll see about that in part 2. Eventually asking friend Rachel Skid Row if he could borrow some of his Spector basses. Asking, "I really want to check out and see what those things sound like. I tried them on a couple of songs, like 5 Minutes Alone. After that, I was a full-blown Spector fan. I had to have one, and I played them ever since." On one of the very first dates of the Far Beyond Driven tour, Stuart Spector, the owner of Spector Basses, came to the show. and handed Rex a black 4-string NS2 in a PJ configuration. Shortly thereafter, in 1995, Rex commissioned Spector to build him a 5-string model that would become his main bass in the years to follow. The bass was built with 2 humbuckers and nicknamed Brownie. It arrived around the same time as a show in the Roseland Ballroom in New York, one of the very first shows this bass debuted on. Throughout Rex's career, he's claimed to collect more than 40 Spector basses. He would later state in an interview with skullandbones.com, "I have a great relationship with those guys. I knew what sound I always wanted to come out of my bass, and they nailed it. Obviously, it depends on the song. I have a huge bass collection, man. But I know by heart which Spector has the right sound for that piece of music, and that's really important to me. Plus, they make the baddest basses on the planet. They are just the best." The great Southern Trendkill continues with the use of Spector basses. The new models, both in 4 and 5-string versions, were coloured with a brown quilt top and EMG humbuckers. Rex would regularly switch between his black and his brown quilt models frequently throughout every show. His original black 4-string NS2 returned, as well as a 5-string model. In some spots, like in 1998, Fernandez returns with a reverse headstock and what looks like a precision bass. The only real change came about 1999, with the addition of a Rex Brown prototype Spector. This item was on auction too in recent years, and Rex describes the following. "This was one of many prototypes that I had drawn up and had Stuart commission for me. The bass was played on just about every Ozfest we ever played, and that was a bunch. Even though it says prototype, this design went through many different woods and necks. This is one of my faves." The other designs and variations can be seen in the final years of Pantera. These wing Spectors, which took inspiration from a Gibson Thunderbird, would follow Rex into the 21st century, with a 5-string model in a dark blue colour, seen in the video for Revolution Is My Name, as well as a plain black 5-string, a second 5-string in black but with flamed racing stripes, and a white 4-string model in a grungy paint job. Spector also released their first Rex Brown signature bass around 2001 based on this design. They came in several different colours and patterns, like this awesome holographic one, which kind of reminds me of the good old days of Pogs.
Remember Alf? He's back! In pod form.
At this time, Rex describes that Pantera was hanging on by the thinnest of threads, with substance abuse issues and personality clashes becoming ever apparent. Everyone was keen to take a break from each other, but the tour dates kept coming. Unbeknownst to the band at this time, Pantera would officially play their last show in Yokohama, Japan on August 28, 2001. 14 days later, the attacks of September 11th occurred. The band cancelled their European dates and headed back to the US. Rex mentions that he and the Abbotts were willing to start work on a new Pantera album, but only after a break had been had. It would be at this point in time Rex went on to participate with Down, and tensions in Pantera reached absolute breaking point, eventually leading to its downfall. I'll discuss that a lot more in part 2, so let's continue with the glory days of Pantera with Amplifiers. Unfortunately for us, Rex's autobiography doesn't go into any details about his gear before Pantera, so we're going to have to start there. First seen in the glam days, the backline was a wall of Randall heads and cabs. Most belonged to Dime, of course, but Rex Rocker would be using up to 2 Randall RBA 500 ES heads, connected to a 4x10 and most likely a 115 cabinet twice. This setup would stay until the release of Cowboys from Hell in 1990. Following this, Rex would claim Ampeg came to the rescue.
Around 1990, Ampeg kind of came to the rescue. I got 2 810s and I got 2 SVT Pro, and I still have those.
And finally got himself a pair of Ampeg SVT2s and 8x10 cabinets, famously seen in the Cowboys from Hell video. The SVT2 Pros and the 8x10s were his main staple, and the cabs would either go up or down in size depending on the size of the venue played. Like at Monsters of Rock Festival in Moscow, where he played with 4 stacked 8x10 cabs. Also, if you look behind Vinny, you'll notice an SVT V4B. Some early shows have Rex using additional 1x15 cabs alongside the 810s. Rex is a dyed-in-the-wool Ampeg champion and has no doubt tried everything, so you can expect some experimentation from time to time. By the tour for Far Beyond Driven in 1994, their setup had changed to the newly released Ampeg SVT Classic setup. consisting of up to 16 Ampeg SVT classic heads. Yes, 16 heads, and 6 SVT 8x10s. However, these Ampeg CLs hold a dirty little secret. They are dummies. Going back to the first auction Rex held, he puts up for sale several SVT CL dummy heads. The electronics are removed, but a switch was added to turn on an LED light. You know, so it looks legit. It should come as no surprise really. Think about the poor roadies that have to lift these things off of the bus onto the stage every night, over and over. That and haulage is expensive. So keep this in mind when you see a wall of Marshall cabinets, or even, like in this case, a wall of Ampeg cabinets. 80% of them are probably for cosmetics only. Sorry to burst your bubble. Real SVT CLs and SVT2 Pros can be seen in shows throughout 1995. Whilst on tour for the Great Southern Trendkill, the Ampeg rig distinguishes itself from previous iterations by being all grey. It's easy to spot, as well as Rex cutting off his hair. 6 8x10s, sometimes 9, are piled up behind him, and the heads are hidden. I believe they could be Ampeg SVT2Ps or SVT3 Pros at this point. I don't have a date for this picture, but judging by Rex's short hair, it's probably around the same time. This, and I've not seen Rex play with SVTs on stage during my research. Rex was asked in a Bass Player magazine interview how his setup changed recording Trendkill. He answered, "We tried a couple of different SVT setups, but it didn't work out. So I went back to what I used on the Far Beyond Driven tour. Spector basses, SVT2P preamps, Crest 8001 power amps, and SVT 8x10s. Just to add some balance on Rex's part. He also stated in an auction item for 2015, "The Ampeg 4s were my main amps that I started playing live from around 1995, when they came out until the end." Again, I haven't necessarily seen SVT4s in his bass rig at this point in time in Pantera, but it's possible they could be hidden away. Side note, for a mix on Trendkill, Rex shared, "We shot for a lot more mid-range on this record. Dime's low end is real fat coming off tape, so we had to compensate for that. We wanted that 900Hz to 2K region good, solid and punchy, because Dime's guitar is dipped so much in that area. Boosting the mids definitely gives my bass more cut in the mix. It's more in your face." 1996's video Drag the Waters provides a glimpse of another V4B. If you're familiar with the amp designs on stage, it's at this point in 1997 where a steel frame was fitted around the cabs, still laying flat. A wire fence was added not long after, you know, to give it that WrestleMania look. This setup would continue until the year 2000, where Ampeg CLs return in the video for Revolution Is My Name, accompanied by some classic 8x10s. For the Reinventing the Steel tour, the amplifier aesthetics would change again. Still confined to a steel cage around it, but this time with up to 6 PR810Hs and 6 PR410Hs. It does appear in some shows that a set of 2x10s were on top of this rig and later removed. These are believed to be powered by Ampeg SVT4 Pros at this point. Rex would mention in one of the auction descriptions, "After having used the PR410H and PR810H cabinets for a long time, I worked with Ampeg on a new design, which eventually became this SVT410AV and 810 series. I wanted a new look and came up with the silver grey mesh grille front, which they ended up using on later models as well." To round up amps in Pantera, here is a few cool miscellaneous amps worth talking about. Up for sale on the auction site was a 12-inch Randall isolation speaker cabinet. If you guys aren't familiar with these, you're in for a treat. They are a recording and a touring musician's best friend. You get a speaker and a microphone you really like. It can also be just the cab. Then you put it in an acoustically treated box. Plug in a feed from your preamp and connect an XLR to front of house. This cab would sit backstage, in the wings, on the haulage truck, as long as the cables were long enough. You can run your amp as loud as you like, avoiding deafening people and other audio bleed. Perfect if you want to crank up a tube amp like an SVT. The description for this item was listed as saying, "Rex used this custom build Randall isolation 12-inch speaker cabinet during the recording of the last few Pantera studio albums, and it is to a large degree responsible for the sound of many of the classic Pantera tunes. In several cases, this cabinet was even used from behind the stage during concert. Rex continues, "To me, this is a very personal speaker. As you will know, Dime was endorsed by Randall, and one day they approached me and built this isolation cabinet, which is truly a one of a kind. It brings back a lot of memories, in addition to it being just flat out rare." Other than that, Rex had a couple of practice amplifiers, like a Yamaha VX25B, Ampeg BA110, and Gallien-Kruger MB150S. As you'll find out in part 2, Rex has only recently become a pedalboard geek, but in the early days of Pantera, there were only really 2 pedals Rex relied on. First is a subtle chorus effect from a Boss CE3, which was used to add some presence to his sound. You can easily notice this on live renditions of Cemetery Gates. Of course, this was sold off in the first auction in 2015. And in some shows, you're likely to hear the intense wah of a Morley Pro Series 2 bass wah pedal. Yes, like on this clip of Yesterday Don't Mean Shit. Rex's tone in Pantera would directly come from the use of Ampeg SVTs to get that grindy sound. This could have also been used in conjunction with a Boss bass overdrive. Again, another pedal listed for auction. As many of his pedals are visible in Down Onwards, coming up in part 2, I have a feeling this was only used in Pantera. Rex also explained that a set of Moo Taurus bass pedals were used during the recording of all the Pantera albums, just so there'd be no dropout. Who'd have thought? Rex has been a long time user of SansAmp and listed in the Hall of Fame. His tone is synonymous with the SansAmp Ampeg Spector combo. He would applaud the use of the SansAmp bass driver DI in the early days of Pantera. Every track that was played on all those records were deeply affected by the sound of that little box. We also know that a SansAmp PSA-1 was spotted in his rig around 1996 on the Great Southern Trendkill tour. In his rig at the time was a Rockstrum basic preamp, although I have come across some chatter that this was upgraded to the Rockstrum Voodoo model, but I must admit, I haven't seen this for myself. Then we got the Ampeg SVT2P, a DBX160 compressor, and a Korg DT1 Pro tuner. This was powered by the Crest 8001 amplifier, and the Boss pedal is sat on top of his cabs. This was most likely the rig powering the shows from 1996 up until the final performance in 2001. Into the home stretch. It would look like Rex and/or Pantera were endorsed by Dean Markley in 1997, with Rex using the blue steels through the early part of Pantera, more than likely 45 to 105. I only based this off of the blue steel sticker seen on his bass and later on in his rig. However, confirmations soon arise in 2000, with Rex using the Dean Markley Signature Series medium light, again 45 to 105. He switches back to blue steels with Down, as was confirmed in an interview with Bass Player magazine in 2008. Rex will continue using blue steels up until 2017, where he was poached by Ernie Ball, using the Slinky Cobalts 45 to 105. He still uses them to this day. Speaking of strings, there's always been this inconsistency on figuring out how Pantera were tuned. Rex revealed, "We always use drop D, but we tune down just a quarter step. Back in the day, we tuned to D sharp plus 40 cents, which would be just under half a step. I think Dime came up with that. There are a lot of tracks like I'm Broken and 5 Minutes Alone, where Dime is tuned down a full step, and I'm tuned down to D. I'm almost positive that both Cowboys and Vulgar were D sharp plus 40 cents. We didn't want to make it like everybody else. We wanted to have our distinct tonal range there." There's also this picture from the headstock of Brownie, with some bizarre tuning I cannot wrap my head around. Let's talk about pickups. It looks like the original Charvels and Jacksons were stock pickups, whilst the Red Hamer bass had 2 EMG pickups. EMG would have a massive effect on Rex's tone, and they would continue to be seen in a humbucker set and eventually a PJ set. He was officially listed as an EMG artist in 2013 with the PJ set, which was something Rex originally disliked.
I had Spector make me some different basses. This one here came in and it was PJ, and I was like, dude, there's no way. I've been playing humbuckers forever. Plugged it in, kind of tweaked it a little bit, and Where's my backup?
The video trails off. I'm not sure what he was going to say here. He didn't like them, now he does. That's all that matters. EMGs were fitted to practically every Spector bass Rex owns, and even some of the Warwicks today. Warwick's coming up in part 2, I haven't forgotten. However, in May 2018, Rex would release his very own signature pickup with Seymour Duncan. Professing, I recently fell in love with the Seymour Duncan quarter-pound PJ set, but also wanted the power and versatility of the most aggressive active preamp and EQ, and the ability to quickly and easily engage it with a push-pull volume pop. And the Rex Brown quarter-pound PJ system was born. This set can clearly be seen installed on a Warwick bass in 2018. Oh, how time flies, and we've only just scratched the surface of Rex Brown's bass rig, so if you think there's something that I've missed out, hold that thought. Just wait until part 2 comes out. Join me in part 2 where we cover brand new ESP LTD basses in down, new Hartke amplifiers in Kill Devil Hill, brand new custom guitars, Warwick basses, and a shit ton of effects pedals on Rex's solo albums. All that and a lot more in part 2. Take a look at the show notes for a full list of everything mentioned today, and if you are part of the 87% I spoke about earlier in the video, make sure you subscribe and click the bell icon so you'll be notified when part 2 of Rex Brown's bass rig is released. Lastly, I am looking for suggestions, so if there's someone you are dying to see on this channel, let me know in the comments down below, and I might just do it. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you all in part 2.